Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We had about 500 registrants for today's webinar, so I definitely want to give it just a minute or so more for people to join so we can have critical mass before we get started. As people are joining, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat where you're tuning in from and maybe something you're looking forward to this fall. Although, as I'm saying that, I'm realizing it's supposed to get to 80 degrees, so it doesn't quite feel like fall, but the leaves are changing, so I guess that's an indicator.
I'm appreciating these warm days right now for sure. Get a little bit of extra summer work done before fall really kicks in.
And with the summer that we had, this is probably some of the warmer temperatures we've had too. So we kind of missed out on the actual summer temperatures until now.
Plus, we all know it'll snow in a week at least. So we have that to look forward to.
No, Robin, don't say that. All right, a few more seconds. People are joining. Okay, I think we can get started in the interest of time. More people will trickle in. But thanks everyone so much for taking some time out of your Wednesday to join us for the first Weatherization Wednesday of the Button Up Vermont campaign. We are recording this session and it will be posted to the buttonupvermont.org website afterwards. And I also want to note that we are hosting this same session again next Wednesday, October 11th at 6 p.m. So if you need to hop off early or you know someone who wanted to be here but couldn't today, I suggest you register for that one and you can do that at buttonupvermont.org. Okay, so hopefully it's obvious that today we are talking about weatherization, which I know is top of mind as we are getting close to the heating season, although as we mentioned, it is unseasonably warm today. I want to quickly just run through some logistics, introduce myself, and then I'll turn it over to our fabulous presenters, Robin and Matt. My name is Becca Custer. I'm a community engagement manager at Efficiency Vermont and help to lead the Button Up campaign, which is the annual outreach and education campaign in Vermont to help spread awareness of the benefits of weatherization and help Vermonters prepare for winter. And Efficiency Vermont is the sponsor and facilitator of the campaign. And we also realized after doing these sessions for many years now that not everyone knows who Efficiency Vermont is. So Matt, next slide. For folks that don't know who Efficiency Vermont is, we are a statewide energy efficiency utility, which really means that we help Vermonters, businesses, and residents save money on energy and reduce their energy use. And we really help them better understand and make better use of their energy and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. We are one of the many partners of the Button Up campaign. We have our great weatherization agencies across the state, regional planning commissions, utilities, nonprofits, town energy committees, just to name a few. And we are very lucky to have one of those partners on the call today. Matt, next slide. VGS is our co-host of today's session, and VGS provides natural gas service heat pumps and efficiency programs in Franklin, Chittenden, and Addison counties. We're very lucky to have Tim Perrin on the call with us today. So if you're a VGS customer or you have questions about their programs, you can feel free to put your questions in the chat and Tim can get to those. And if there are other partners on the call today, please feel free to engage in the chat. If you're doing any kind of local efforts that folks on this call could get involved in, please feel free to share that. I know there are several in-person events that partners are hosting across the state, so feel free to put details about those in the chat here. And next slide. Excitingly, we are selecting one of the attendees on today's call to win a $50 gift card to a local hardware store. We're going to do that drawing after the webinar, but if you are that lucky winner, be on the lookout for an email for us in the next day or two. Yes, Laura, woot woot in the chat. Great, next slide. So quick run through of the agenda, what you're going to learn today. Matt's going to give an overview of what weatherization is and why it's so important, and then really start to talk about how to get started, whether that's participating in an energy assessment of your home, helping find a contractor to actually do that work, accessing the rebates and incentives, as well as financing if that's of interest to you. And then we're going to have about 20 or so minutes after the presentation for Q&A. We'll get to as many questions as we can, but know there's a lot of people on the call today. We are going to start with some of the questions that we got in during registration. Those were great questions, so thank you for submitting those. And I think a lot of common questions that folks will have on this call today. So we'll start with those and then dive into the questions we received via chat. If you are on Zoom, please feel free to put your questions in the chat. And if you are joining us on Facebook, you can put your questions in the comments there. And with that, I think I've gone through all the logistics. So again, thanks so much everyone for joining. And I'm really excited to be joined by my fabulous colleagues at Efficiency Vermont, Robin King and Matt Sharp, who are going to give the presentation and are really the weatherization experts. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to you, Matt and Robin.
Okay, thank you, Becca. Thank you everyone for joining us. And we're gonna go over weatherization, why it's important, what you can do about it, and what kind of resources are available to help you. When, you know, the why, the what is weatherization piece, it, you know, really looking at the word, it's about protecting your home from the weather, making it more resilient against weather of all kinds, whether that's cold, hot, wind, snow, water. It is protecting your home. And why, some reasons are obvious. It does help with the indoor air quality of your home, the comfort, it lowers your energy bills, and it can allow you to easier heat your home, which can open up your options for how you heat your home, whether that be heat pumps or smaller systems in general. So we always, you know, this slide has sort of been time proven, and we refer to it a lot because it seems to resonate with folks. And the example is the sweater and the windbreaker of how to address the thermal envelope of your home. And so we're all familiar with sweaters or, you know, the early fleece jackets that wind would just blow right through. And we have to put a air barrier around us, around that sweater, in the form of a windbreaker or a shell that will keep the wind from going through that sweater. And that allows the sweater to be your insulating layer, and it allows the shell to be your air barrier, which results in a thermal boundary that is effective and can save energy and increase your comfort. That same analogy can be applied to insulation and weatherization. So just putting a fluffy layer of insulation somewhere doesn't necessarily stop the hot air from going right through that. And so we're going to talk a lot about air sealing and making an air barrier that will allow that insulation to be effective. And, you know, some, you know, apparel manufacturers figured this out, and they make Gore-Tex or some other brands of highly insulative and air block properties so that you can have just one layer and it be effective. And there are some insulations that do that as well. So just keep that in mind as you're going through how you might approach a project. Both things, insulation and air sealing, are very important. And another example is the cooler. So you know, the shell of the cooler is very well insulated, but if you don't close the top, that energy that's in there keeping your products cool is going to escape. You're going to melt your ice. You're going to waste your energy source, which is your ice, and then you're not going to be able to keep your drinks or your food cool anymore. So closing that cap, making sure it's a nice air sealed lid, can allow that ice to last a lot longer, and not wasting it, and keep your food cool. Air leaks occur naturally through convection. So as air warms up, it becomes more buoyant and it rises up and tends to leave the top of the building. And the picture on the screen where you have these blue arrows down low, that indicates cool air that is denser and heavier. And that's going to be drawn in down below in a negative pressure scenario where that air is then warmed inside the building and rises and puts pressure up on the top of the building where it leaks out. And so if you can think about the number scale and you have a negative numbers on one end and you go across the number scale, you go past 0 and then you start to increase again. And the same thing is kind of happening here with the blue arrows on the bottom being the negative scale. As you rise up the building, you go past 0, and at the top of the building, you have positive pressures pushing up the top. So it's really important to air seal both areas, the bottom to cut off the air leaks coming in and the top to cut off the air leaks going out. So a few things to consider. The ABCs of weatherization is a term that we refer to sometimes, and that stands for attic, basement, and conditioned area, being sort of the order of priority that it usually makes sense to look. So number 1, the attic, 1 and 2 in this example are the top of the building, the attic and the ceiling, and making sure that is airtight and not just have blown insulation or insulation bats laid up there. If you can imagine the layout of your house and each partition wall that separates a room from another room or a hallway on the top level of your building, and that the lines of all those partition walls represent areas where air can leak up into your attic and past your ceiling. And so if you were up in an attic and you can imagine where, or even draw a map of where all those walls are, those are all the areas that need to be sealed. Air can leak past insulation, referencing back to the sweater and air barrier slide. So you need to air seal the tops of the walls, all the penetrations, the light fixtures, and really seal it up tight, and then add a nice layer of insulation that can be effective. Down low is a similar thing. The rim joist, which is number 3 here, and the basement walls, which oftentimes are field stone, very leaky walls, they need to be sealed to keep air and soil gas from entering the building and then being brought into the living space. And you can probably imagine the health benefit of doing that as well, to keep the moisture out of the basement, to keep the soil gas out of the basement by sealing up all those leaks. Safety and health is a very important part of weatherization. You don't really want to disturb asbestos. You have to address any structural damage that might exist. And moisture can be problematic if it comes into a tight home. It can be problematic in any home, but in a tight home, it can be even more problematic. So as part of weatherization, dealing with water entry is critical, and water entry could be very visible in terms of a water leak that maybe would go to a sump pump and pumped out, but it also can be fairly invisible through dirt floors that might evaporate the moisture in the soil into the space. So addressing the health and safety issues as part of a weatherization project is very important. And one of the other pieces that sometimes is understood well is that as you make a building tighter and tighter, the systems that need air, like a wood stove or a furnace, they don't have as much air as they did before you did the weatherization work. So it's really important to test and evaluate whether those systems have enough air as part of your weatherization work, and maybe in some cases provide air directly to them so that they don't have to interact with the indoor air in order to work properly. So that's to say, weatherization can impact air quality, and in a good way, if done properly. You can control the amount of air through your building, which is going to save energy. It's going to make you more comfortable. It's going to keep the contaminants that might get sucked in with the air from coming into your house. So when air leaks into a house through a wall, and maybe that wall has fiberglass in it, then you're introducing air that's mixing with the insulation materials in your house and then brought into your indoor air. And so sealing the leaks to keep that from happening keeps those insulation materials from getting fibers into your house. And keeping your building dry and warm can go a long ways towards respiratory health and general quality of air in your home. Working with a certified contractor is one way to help ensure that all these things are being considered as part of your project. And so the certified contractors are trained to assess indoor air quality, to assess ventilation needs, to ensure moisture issues are dealt with as part of a weatherization project. And it's highly recommended to use a pro for a lot of this work. As far as why, a lot of the reasons are, stated already. You can save money, you can increase comfort, you can save energy, reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Some of the other reasons we went over in terms of improving indoor air quality, improving the health and comfort. And I think the other piece is that we can help transition our heating systems from the high capacity, high output systems that use fossil fuels. And with a buttoned up home, you can really make your home more compatible with a heat pump system, a system that is smaller and might emit less greenhouse gas emissions to heat your home. So to get started, I am going to hand it off now to Robin King, and she will walk us through how you can do this.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you in advance for advancing my slides. I'm Robin King. I'm a program manager here at Efficiency Vermont. I'm so glad to see you all here today. I'm really happy to be able to talk a little bit more about the how behind weatherization. So one of the things that we really do recommend that folks do if they're just getting started is to access one of the services that Efficiency Vermont offers, which is called a virtual home energy visit. So during these visits, they're about 90 minutes long. Someone can sign up to talk to one of our in-house experts like Matt, who will guide you through what you're seeing in your home and what specific issues you're seeing, or if there are areas for improvement. You can either do this through a phone, kind of showing someone around your house, or through a laptop if you have one. And if you're feeling like you don't have either of those things and it's a little kind of anxiety inducing to sign up for one of these, we also do coach people over the phone. So, we're really just a phone call away. After the visit, we give a personalized list of recommendations based on what was discussed during the visit, so that you have something kind of tangible in hand to follow up with. And certainly the folks that are helping guide you through this experience within your virtual home energy visit are happy to answer any questions you might have after that visit. So it's a really nice way to just kind of learn a little bit more about what Matt was talking about earlier, and also to think about kind of how that applies to your own home. You can sign up for one of these visits at efficiencyvermont.com, and they're free. And so there's a whole calendar available when you can look at what might make most sense to you. We are partners with a lot of folks across the state who also provide services, which I'll be covering a little bit more later on in the presentation, but I also just kind of wanted to mention here that our co-host VGS does provide services as well. And so if you are a VGS customer and you're in today's webinar and you're interested in moving forward, highly recommend you visit the VGS website so you can assess what you might be qualified for through their services. So just a nod to that. Next slide, Matt. So in general, I'm going to cover a few weatherization programs that are accessible to folks either kind of in specific areas or across the state. So one of the programs that I wanted to highlight is the Weatherization Assistance Program that's delivered by the community action partners across the state. We have a slide that's available later on in the presentation to kind of note who's available where. I'm also going to be talking a little bit more about the do-it-yourself weatherization program. So I've seen a couple of questions come in about do-it-yourself weatherization, so we can get into a little bit more of the weeds there. We'll also be talking about Efficiency Vermont's Home Performance with Energy Star program, which is a more comprehensive weatherization program that's delivered through certified contractors like Matt, who was just speaking about. We also do have a building performance program, which looks a little bit more in depth at multifamily buildings and kind of mixed use commercial and residential buildings. And last but not least, I just wanted to touch on a topic that comes up pretty frequently within weatherization, which is windows. I see a chat already came in about windows, and I just wanted to note that window replacements are typically not eligible within our comprehensive weatherization programs like Home Performance with Energy Star, given that what we typically prioritize are actions and work that does return for customers. So there is a kind of clear return on investment. With windows, given the high upfront cost, although there are some savings to be gained with new windows, it's typically not the case that someone would have a very good return on investment with windows. So we don't necessarily include them in our programs just because we're trying to kind of make sure our dollars go as far as they can. So for those of you who are contemplating new windows, I think certainly if it makes sense for your home and there's kind of clear reason to do so, that's great. And, we just wanted to kind of highlight that, sometimes they're just not as high efficiency as other things that we support through our programs. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the Weatherization Assistance Program includes free weatherization services for income eligible households. There are service providers across the state. So this slide does give some context as to who serves which area of the state, but certainly if you're interested in knowing kind of which one covers your community, if you're kind of looking at the map with squinted eyes saying, oh, where am I? There's more information available on the websites that I'm sure will be posted in the chat in terms of how you can get started. So I highly recommend, if you think you might be eligible, going through and contacting your local weatherization provider. It's a really excellent program, and we're so grateful for the partners who deliver these services. So highly recommended. Next slide, please. Efficiency Vermont's in-house program for comprehensive weatherization is called Home Performance with Energy Star, as I mentioned earlier. So this program functions by folks working with an Efficiency Excellence Network contractor, which is a certified contractor who has specialized training and knowledge in weatherization. You can find the weatherization-focused Efficiency Excellence Network contractors on our Find a Pro website. So you can filter based on where you live to see who might be able to serve you. We do know that contractors are quite busy these days, so I just wanted to note that it's always a great idea to call a few contractors to see who might be able to come out and what works within your timeline. But there might be a little bit of a wait just because folks are really busy, focusing on folks with flood impacted households and other things that are just kind of already in the pipeline. So just wanted to mention that it's good to always kind of call around and expect that there might be a little bit of a wait, but the wait is well worth it. So we do have some really exciting incentives available right now. So if you do take on a project through the Home Performance with Energy Star program, you're eligible to receive 75% back of project costs up to either $4,000 or $9,500, depending on whether or not you're income eligible. All of our income eligibility guidelines are available on our website, and we do talk a little bit about how someone can calculate their household income. So if you're interested in kind of knowing what you'd be eligible for, you can do a quick check to see kind of where you would fall. So it's a great resource. Thank you for posting the link. Highly recommend you visit the website and kind of see what's available to you. And if you have any questions, always certainly feel free to call into our customer support line. We have more information on that later on in the presentation. Next slide, please. Also available is a do-it-yourself weatherization rebate. This works in the way that you would complete 3 eligible projects and you'd be able to receive $100 cash back. Eligible projects include air sealing and insulating attics and basements, weatherizing windows and doors, installing new windows or window inserts, and insulating hot water pipes. There is information on our website on how to do these types of projects. So there's guides to walk you through the different steps that you can take to complete these projects. And it's a great way to do a few things around your house that will have some energy savings associated with them. And certainly I think there's a lot of interest in windows within this program. So there's a lot of support for doing window attachments like window dressers or eco smart insulating shades. So it's a great way to kind of engage with some things you can do around the house and get some support for it. Next slide. I did want to mention that do-it-yourself weatherization isn't always the best fit. It's a great way to get started. It's a great way to do some, again, things around the house that will ultimately save energy, improve comfort, and save money. However, there is a very big difference between doing some of these items and engaging with our Home Performance with Energy Star program that's available through our qualified contractor network. So this slide gives a little bit of context on the types of things that are more within the realm of DIY versus things that are really great to partner with a contractor on. So if it comes to weatherizing windows, which can often mean, you know, sealing the cracks around windows or attaching window attachments in the interior, weatherizing exterior doors or insulating pipes, those are all things that are fairly low lift and you can do yourself. But when it comes to really comprehensive air sealing, so the type of activity that Matt was talking about in terms of installing insulation and performing really comprehensive air sealing, that's where we always recommend that you connect with a contractor who is able to kind of look at the house more comprehensively and really pay attention to how the installation of insulation and air sealing can impact the health and safety of your home and the air quality and all the things that Matt covered in more depth. Next slide, please. I also wanted to mention if you're interested in getting started, but there's you know, an interest in relieving the burden of having an upfront cost, we do have available the home energy loan, which can provide no to low interest financing. We work with participating lenders that are all listed on this slide, and I know that there is a representative of VSECU here today. And so if you have any questions about VSECU specifically, I'm sure Lisa would be happy to answer. But we have statewide coverage through our participating lenders, and eligible projects include weatherization, heat pumps and water heaters, wood heating systems, and Energy Star appliances. So there's no minimum loan amount. The loan maximum is $20,000. And these are very competitive interest rates that should hopefully allow folks to feel confident in moving forward affordably. Next slide, please. Efficiency Vermont, Vermont Gas Systems, and Burlington Electric Department are all partnering with Vermont Housing Finance Agency. And I know that Mia Watson is here today from Vermont Housing Finance Agency. Thank you, Mia, for joining us. But this is the Weatherization Repayment Assistance Program, which is an on-bill financing program. The program features include no upfront cost to take on weatherization projects and an ability to repay on your utility bill for a term of up to 15 years. So it kind of consolidates offsets those payments into that monthly utility bill that you're already receiving, which is a really convenient way to pay for these projects. And there are some project qualifications which are on the screen. So the projects can include weatherization or weatherization plus an efficient space or water heating system. This must be a project that goes through one of our participating contractors, which are all available on our website if you want to learn more about the program. And projects will all be cash flow positive, and that's something that we'll evaluate on your behalf just to make sure that the project qualifies. But we do have a lot of information on our website available on the WRAP program. So really feel free to contact us or reach out or look on our website. Happy to talk more about this in depth if you're interested. Next slide. So I mentioned this before, we do have Find a Pro or Retailer website so that you can find a contractor to get started with your comprehensive weatherization project. The Efficiency Excellence Network, which is our qualified contractor network, includes contractors, installers, retailers, and others who are trained to deliver high quality efficiency services. We are partnering with a lot of these contractors to help folks in their own homes. And if you're interested in learning more or which contractors are available in your area, feel free to visit the website. It's linked here. It's a great resource, and hope you all visit it after today's webinar. Next slide, please. Here is some information on our co-hosts offer. So this is straight from VGS. I know Tim Perrin is here, but there are some really robust weatherization incentives available for VGS customers. So there are rebates available for single family homes, income eligible qualifications for higher incentives. There are multifamily incentives as well that are up to $7,500, and there's 0% financing available through Green Mountain Credit Union. So if anyone is a VGS customer on today's call, highly recommend reaching out to VGS to find out more how you can get started. And certainly if there are questions that are coming in that are specific to VGS, I'm sure Tim Perrin, who is here with us today, would be happy to answer them. Next slide, please. Okay, so next steps. I think I might be passing it back to Becca for this one.
That's fine, Robin. I can't take this on. I thought you were taking this. That's okay. So next steps, what you can do, as Robin mentioned, we have a great customer support team at Efficiency Vermont. They're always happy to answer your questions and kind of walk through your situation to figure out what the best next steps are for you. You can also schedule a free virtual home energy visit, which Robin mentioned, which is a really good place to start if you're not really sure what to do in your house. You can talk with an expert. Again, if you're ready to do the work already, you can use the Find a Pro tool to connect with a local contractor to do the work. And again, if you think you might be eligible for the Weatherization Assistance Program, you can reach out to your local community action agency if you think you're eligible to apply for that. And of course, we also mentioned that VGS customers can take advantage of their home energy assessment, which is the home energy evaluation. And I think we put a link to that in the chat as well. So those are some concrete next steps that you can take. Next slide. I want to note really quickly that we are hosting 3 other Weatherization Wednesdays throughout the month of October. The next one is October 11th at 6, like I mentioned, and that will be a repeat of today's session. And then we're going to be hosting 2 Heat Pump 101 webinars, one on October 18th at noon and the other October 25th at 6 p.m. So feel free to register for those at the buttonupvermont.org website. I think. Oh, and last but not least, we have a lot of partners, like I mentioned, hosting in-person button-up events across the state. Here are just a few of the upcoming ones. So if you live in these areas or you're interested in attending one of these in-person events, there will be several more posted on the website. So feel free to check out that link there as well. Okay, I think we can turn it to questions. I will note that we have some great Efficiency Vermont staff in the chat answering questions. So I actually think that a lot of the ones that have come in have been answered, but we'll make sure to get to the rest of them. And don't forget to put any questions you have there. I'm going to start with Robin mentioned windows and how new windows might not be the best return on investment, but people did have questions about what are some other things they can do, some cost-effective strategies for dealing with windows and doors if they've lost weather stripping or they have single pane windows. So curious if Matt or Robin has any advice for folks in that situation.
Matt, do you want to take this one? Great.
Yeah, yeah. Windows still deserve some attention. You know, the biggest impact you can make when you have older windows is to make sure the weather stripping is allowing them to be tight. Most people at this point have exterior storm windows, so essentially you have 2 panes of glass. You know, you're maybe at about an R2. A brand new window might be at a R3.5 if it's a double pane window, or better if it's triple pane. Like was said earlier, because of the high cost to replace windows and it being, you know, really about 15 square feet area per window, going from R2 to R3 is not a huge energy benefit just on R value alone. But for air leakage reduction, you do get a lot of benefit by sealing them. So weather stripping windows goes a long way to do that. Interior storm inserts can do a very good job at stopping the drafts, as well as adding a little bit of R value to the glass. So those are 2 things to really look at doing to help improve your windows.
Great. Reading back from the questions that we got when people registered, one person asked, how do I know if my attic has enough insulation?
I can take that as well. I think,
you wouldn't mind, Matt.
You know, I think the real question is, how do you know if your attic's not leaking a bunch of air past the insulation that you have? And that's where a blower door test can really help understand how leaky your attic might be. And a blower door test is not something that is done by a professional doing an energy audit. Just in terms of level of insulation, you know, you want between 14 and 18 inches of insulation in our climate. You want to get to an R49 for R value. But again, it's, you know, I think a lot of people have added fluff to their attics, but the key is, has it been air sealed? So I always look back to that.
Great. I also noticed a fair amount of questions about DIY, and I just want to plug the blog that we put in the chat. Has a lot of great tips for how to do those projects yourself. So we don't need to go through all the specific questions, but hopefully that's a helpful resource. We had some questions about manufactured homes. I think some folks are wondering, how can you address these issues in a mobile home, and how is that different perhaps from not a manufactured home?
Yeah, mobile homes can be very challenging, and that's primarily because the attics don't tend to be accessible. So it's hard to access the attics to improve them, or it's already a sort of a very small slope ceiling scenario. That kind of leads to the crawl space. And so one of the things that you can really focus on with a mobile home is making sure the belly insulation is intact and performing well. Sometimes it can be helpful to improve that belly insulation, or if the belly insulation is really not in good condition and you have the ability to put a skirt that's insulated around the base of that mobile home, then you can start to improve not only the energy efficiency, but the comfort, and maybe reduce frozen pipe risk, and make that space a little more isolated from rodents and pests as well.
Speaking of frozen pipes, we did get a few questions coming in about having pipes in an unheated space, particularly in a dirt floor basement, and wondering if they should be covered with insulation. And someone asked, do PEX water pipes need insulation as much as copper pipes do? So maybe that could be kind of one question.
Yeah, so I mean, frozen pipes in general happens by having an under-insulated space that the pipes are near, or even more common, having an air leak that lets outside air be directed very close to a pipe. Insulating the pipes can help with that, but the real problem exists where that cold draft is coming into the house, and that is where it's best to fix the problem. And this goes to back in beginning of the slides, I talked about the rim joist area and the foundation walls and making sure those are airtight and insulated well to keep frozen pipes from happening. As far as copper versus PEX, I mean, they're both going to lose heat. They're both going to be susceptible to freezing. I think the difference mainly is that, you know, copper may burst a little sooner than PEX might crack.
Okay, thank you for that. Someone is asking, does putting down a vapor barrier before blown in cellulose in attic do a sufficient job of air sealing?
The attic vapor barrier is not as critical as the air sealing. So the key is getting it airtight. Especially if it's a vented attic, it could be even a vapor permeable air barrier because that attic space is vented. And you stop most of the moisture from getting into the attic by air sealing anyway. So air seal, air seal, air seal. And the membrane is, it can be a difficult way to air seal because you have seams and cracks and you'll have the same penetrations potentially from plumbing vents and other things that you're going to have to seal. So it's really ideal to seal down at the ceiling plane. So if you're on the attic, looking at your floor, which is the backside of your ceiling, move the insulation away, air seal all the cracks.
Great. A few questions about rebates. We had one if we had rebates around smart home monitoring systems like Sense or others. They've seen other states that have that. So curious if we have rebates like that.
No, not for smart home monitoring devices. Or Robin, you can correct me if I'm wrong. We do have rebates for smart thermostats, which do some amount of monitoring, but not electric panel monitoring.
Thanks, Matt.
Matt, I couldn't have said it better. So thank you for jumping in.
We had a question that I think was answered, but I do just want to make sure that it's fully answered because they asked if they've already done weatherization work, can they get that rebate retroactively? And I think we answered it in the DIY perspective, but I'm curious, Robin, if you can speak to the home performance program.
Sure thing. So for the home performance program, we do have a what we often refer to as a lifetime cap. So if you have done a weatherization project before and partnered with Efficiency Vermont on that weatherization project, we take that rebate into account in terms of what your new rebate looks like. So if you had previously received $5,000 and our current incentive available is $9,500, if you're income eligible, you'd be able to receive the difference between those two amounts. So essentially, we are able to provide an incentive that's current with the current incentive amount less what you had received previously. What we are doing, though, if you are in a flood impacted community and you have had damage to that previous weatherization project that you had taken on, we are removing that lifetime cap so they're able to receive the full incentive. So just wanted to call that out as it is a little bit of a nuance within the program, but if you have questions on that specifically, I highly recommend calling our customer support line just to sort out what you might be eligible for.
Great. We have a question in the chat. Someone asked, we are thinking about DIY sealing the rim joist in our basement. Do you recommend foam board sealed with the mini spray foam or just using the regular spray foam for all over the rim joist area?
I would say the foam board cut to fit the rim joist bays and then sealed in place with the canned foam is a good approach. It limits your exposure as a worker to the foam instead of just spray foaming the whole thing. And it's fairly straightforward to do. It can be, you want to cut the foam board pieces to allow enough space for the canned foam to squirt into the crack to create a good seal. And you want to be aiming for around R20 for that area if you can, and again, very tight.
Great. Someone has a question asking if there are any specific weatherization constraints on homes on the National Historic Register. I don't know if that's something that we can speak to, but Robin, maybe if you have any information or no.
I think it depends on if you're trying to, and this is just off the top of my head, so certainly
No, that's fine.
recommend visiting historic preservation website. I believe that there are certain restrictions on tax credit programs in terms of what you do in the interior and how you alter that interior. I do think also it's always good to check in with those folks if you are interested in kind of preserving the character of the home, and if you're curious about if any weatherization activities might kind of alter the character of that home. I will turn it over to Matt if he has any kind of specific recommendations for historical preservation. I think there are a lot of solutions now that can really preserve the character of the home. So it's not necessarily a non-starter.
Yeah, and I think the key is if you are receiving support from historic preservation, that you talk with them about your project and how it needs to be done. In other examples, what we're aware of is that a lot of times the requirement would be to make sure whatever you do can be undone. And that might limit your use of materials to things that you can easily take apart to restore the original condition of the building should you need to. And certainly when you work under those conditions, you start limiting your options, and it becomes even more important to really think about the building science, the moisture flow through whatever assemblies you're doing, because the last thing you want to do for any building, historic preservation or not, is to create a moisture problem.
Great. Someone asks if you do a weatherization project that does not produce the required 10% air leakage reduction, who pays for that work and what to do in that situation?
A lot of our contractors are very skilled at assessing the opportunities for air sealing and insulating a home. So it's fairly rare that that does occur. And we always encourage at the outset of a project, if there are concerns about what kind of return you'd have on a project, to have your contractor touch base with Efficiency Vermont. We do a lot of coaching and mentoring with contractors who are in our network to really deliver the best customer experience that we can collectively. So I just know if there are concerns about that at the outset of a project, like certainly we recommend you get in touch with us at the forefront of the project.
Yeah, it is probably also worth just clarifying that the work is between you and the private contractor you hire, and whatever costs you incur, you're going to owe to that contractor. And the rebate program comes after the work is complete as a reimbursement for a portion of the cost. So if you don't reach the 10%, what I would suggest is work with your contractor to achieve the 10%, because there are probably leaks that could still be sealed.
Great. A few more questions that we got through registration. Someone asked, do you recommend the aerosol type fillers for cracks or small openings in foundations? Probably for Matt.
Aerosol type fillers. I'm not sure I can really understand what product is being asked about it. But air sealing materials like spray foam that often comes in a can from the hardware store can be effective in sealing cracks. If you don't want to insulate your entire foundation wall, if you have a rubble foundation, then there's a lot of lineal feet of cracks to seal, and that can be an effective way to do it pretty inexpensively.
Thanks, Matt. I think that's probably what they're referring to. All right, I think we got through most of the questions that came in prior to the webinar. So turning back to the Q&A here and see if we can answer some of these here. Someone asks, where is the attic moisture barrier supposed to be, on top of the 14-inch of insulation, or lay down the moisture barrier and pile the insulation on top?
Again, I would go back to the thinking you need a moisture barrier is the wrong thing to be thinking about. You need to be thinking about having an air barrier. And then the answer to that question is you want your air barrier on the warm side of the insulation. So ideally, that's the sheetrock of the ceiling is your air barrier. And you just need to go around and seal all the cracks of the sheetrock to the top plates and the wiring penetrations and the fans and the lights. But I would definitely not lay a layer of plastic insulation on top of your insulation that's in your attic.
Another person asks, can you speak about highly foam insulated buildings creating moisture or not allowing moisture to leave older rehabilitated buildings?
So the you know, any type of air sealing, whether it's with spray foam insulation or other efforts, is going to create a very tight building. And that is good to be able to control your heat loss. But as the question suggests, you then have another thing to have to control, and that's the indoor air quality. And the way we recommend doing that is through ventilation. If you are building brand new, you know, and achieving very tight levels, we'd be suggesting air-to-air heat exchangers that are ducted throughout the house and provide fresh air to bedrooms and exhaust stale air. That is still the ideal scenario for an existing house that gets tight, but obviously it gets to be very difficult to run ductwork throughout an existing house and very expensive. There are other ways to ventilate a building that can be point source energy recovery ventilators. These are through the wall energy recovery ventilators. And then there's also the very minimum would be an energy code qualifying ventilation unit, which is essentially a low wattage bath fan that's either run continuously or on a timer control.
Great, thank you. We have a question here, and I don't know quite what it's referring to, but I think it's just asking about what to do in a situation where they have a cape home with no attic that is losing heat.
So cape homes, typically in a cape home, the attic is sort of at the floor or like the ceiling of your kitchen. You have a little triangle attic that may not have access to it right now. And then there's a short slope ceiling up to a very small flat attic at the top. That's kind of your traditional cape design. And those, if you do have an attic behind your knee wall, then those are notorious for allowing a lot of heat loss and creating ice dams and general discomfort. So creating access to that space and fixing it is the recommendation. If it's the sort of cape that has a sort of short knee wall that's all the way to the exterior, and all you have is, say, a 3-foot exterior wall, a short slope, and then an attic, there's not a lot you can do to those top spaces without gutting them. But you can, if those ceilings are uninsulated, you can do something like a dense pack in cellulose insulation to fill and deal with the top part. And again, sealing the leaks. If you don't have places to add insulation, sealing the leaks is going to save you the most.
Great. The only other question I see coming into the chat is asking if it's worth insulating the hot water pipes from my heating system that run through the unheated part of the basement. I think you kind of already spoke to that, Matt, but if there's anything else you want to add.
Yeah, I'd say do it. It's so easy and fairly inexpensive that it's worth doing. If you're limited, at least doing the first 5 feet off the water heater is a good idea. And also put your hand on the cold water side of that water heater. Oftentimes you're bleeding heat out the water heater through the cold water pipe too. And if that's the case, insulate that side of the water heater as well, the first few feet.
And want to plug that is one of the eligible projects for the DIY rebate as well. So you can get reimbursed for that material.
Took the words right out of my mouth, Becca.
Sorry, Robin. I knew you were going to say it. Okay, well, hopefully I'm not missing any questions. I think we had some questions answered already in the Q&A. So let me just one more check, and feel free to put any more questions you have in the chat. We do have a lot of questions about heating systems and heat pumps. I think that's probably something that would be worth waiting. You're waiting until you have the heat pump webinar that's happening on the 18th and 25th. I think we can get to those answers then.
One thing I would add just in general, and Robin alluded to this when she was talking about contractors being busy, what would be really good to do is get started and call a contractor, even if it's going to take them 2 months to get to you. At least you've started your process and you're in line, and having that audit and understanding your full scope of work and rebates you might be eligible for does not commit you to doing the work. So get in line, get started, get your scope of work set, and then you're at least in the line for, if not this winter or the end of this winter, for next.
Great. Okay, well, if we don't have any more questions, we can hang on for a few more minutes, but I don't need to keep anyone longer than we need to. And if we don't, maybe any last words from you, Robin or Matt.
Yeah, I echo what Matt said wholeheartedly. I think, you know, finding a way to get started, if that's calling a contractor or calling Efficiency Vermont, to hear a little bit more about what Matt was talking about of how, you know, heat loss works through a home, how, you know, you can address problem areas. We have a lot of in-house knowledge that we're so happy to share with you as you kind of start your journey and learn more about what you can do and kind of where in your house. Getting started with those DIY projects while you might be on a contractor's list is also a great way to kind of start to reduce some energy and to start to see those savings. So highly recommend checking out our DIY program, and then kind of, yeah, looking towards that more comprehensive project that will address your home heating and cooling needs. I think one of the things that we talked a lot about today, because heating season is upon us, is how weatherization really helps with keeping heat in homes, but certainly as our summers are getting hotter, weatherization also can have a really big impact in terms of cooling. So in terms of getting on that list, even if it's not by end of winter, you still have the opportunity to weatherize your home to keep more of the cool air inside this summer. So just a great idea to get started now as you prepare for your upcoming plans.
And I would add too, there's a little bit of chatter going on about an audit or a walkthrough and different costs being thrown around. What I'd suggest you do is ask the people that you're talking to about what you get for the cost that they're quoting, because there's a lot of different ranges of what an energy audit could be. And if you are wanting to make sure you're going to get the Efficiency Vermont rebates for a project, be sure to tell your contractor that. If you just want an idea as to whether you have high impact work to do, make sure that's what you're asking for. And the other thing is, if you really just don't know if an audit is right for you, that's a really good reason to have a virtual home energy visit, because during those calls, you can show us around. We can see what you have to work with and what opportunities might exist, and kind of give you that sense of like, yeah, you have some rebate eligible work here. It's worth to go ahead and get an audit to see what it's going to cost.
Great. Great advice. I think we can end there. I want to thank everyone so much for joining today. We hope that you will join us for one of the heat pump webinars. I want to thank Robin and Matt so much for lending your time and expertise, and of course, Tim Perrin from VGS for being on and answering questions in the chat. And with that, I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Take care.